The Oasis project bid has the capability of adding notes in a number of different ways, and based upon what you're doing, certain notes are required to be in certain locations for various reasons, but most of the time it just doesn't matter, it's going to print. Now let me start out with just adding in something like quantity of 10, type, my fundamental lighting here, A1, 2, and let me just select something. Simple item, it's in there, it adds in a description which will print. I could put another note on it, color code 1 or whatever it is. And again, I make my columns a little bit bigger if I like. An internal note, so let's start there. If I put an internal note on this, like maybe swag, it's just a way of me identifying this one item. Notice it highlights it in yellow, but if I hover over that item, I basically see whatever it is I keyed on that internal note column. Okay, and the reason we do that, basically, if it's you know, if you've added a large column or if you have a bunch of columns on the screen, you can still identify why it's highlighted that item. So maybe confirm voltage or whatever it is you need to place a note on that item so you can keep that visibility. So there's 3 different description, notes, and everything else. Now, we prefer notes to be added to the line if possible, and there are reasons why you may or may not. But the main reason why we like to do this, especially if it's identifying the item, is if we interact with an external data system, an ERP system, a manufacturer data system, or even another Oasis user, the catalog number is what goes and links the 2 items together in the 2 different data systems. The notes come along, and if they're added in a different area, I cannot guarantee that they'll come together inside the other data system. It may move them around in the other data system. It won't be what you see. Okay, and an example of where I've seen issues is, let me add in a couple of notes here, or a couple of lines, and let me just use the note code and then say this is a note. Now this note in here, if I send it over to someone else electronically, I can't guarantee it's going to be at the top or anywhere else in another data system. But if I add a note to a line, and especially if it identifies that item, then they all go together and get processed normally. Now another code we see a lot of use of is blank, and really blank, you can use it for a number of reasons, but I'll put in this is a blank. And then I like to show INT or internal note as a row as well. Now be careful with this one, because if you have something, gave ABC Electric 10 off, that could be dangerous if you accidentally type in note instead of internal note. Again, long days and everything like that, that could be a dangerous item to have in there. But you do have the ability to add an internal note. It does highlight yellow on a line by itself, and probably the better reason for using this is column 1 is for a certain type of customer versus column 2, which is a slightly different type of customer for whatever reason. Okay, so those are my different notes. Just for argument's sake, I'm going to jump over to this notes tab here, and I'll put in a remark. We can see where that shows. And internal, this is a note. And again, we have something over here. I'll show this in a minute, but for right now, I'll just simply say, remember me. Okay. Now, to print something, let me go to the Customers tab. I'll add in a customer real quick. And anytime I add a customer, I always like to identify who it is I'm sending it to, not just the company, but the person, okay? This will be talked over a little more deeply later. But for right now, if I print this, and for right now, I'll do a customer copy to Harry. I'll just do a print preview. Next, for argument's sake, unit extended, show grand totals, that's fine, and print. So what I end up with here is the remarks show at the top, the note line shows, let me zoom in one time here. The blank shows up as well. I'll show you a couple other uses for that. My fundamental lighting item shows up with the description and the line note below, and my notes below that. Also inside the work group setup, I can add in a disclaimer down at the bottom anytime that prints. I can also add in per factory notes that I can control when they print or not, and I'll show a little bit more of that later. Now, everything showed except for the internal notes. Another use for blank is if I put another item in, 10A, that'll work, and I print it, back to Harry, my items appear kind of close together. And again, most of the time this doesn't matter. But what I can do is just add in another little line with blank, print, and it just adds a little bit of space. Again, a visual reference on that. Now, one thing to note is Oasis is not what you see is what you get. That is, what is on the quote is transferred through a little layout that we can actually adjust. This is the default form, the default layout, and I can add in whatever I want. So it has the project name, usually a logo up here. I don't have that set up on my system right now. The location, who I'm sending it to, some various information as far as specifiers and so forth, and then the bill of material. Now, some folks like having lines on quotes. We can set the system up to do that. Sometimes they want it always double spaced and so forth. Whatever that is, that just requires a form change in the system, and we have a lot of these already set up where you can just download them off of our website and just add them into Oasis. But that is the default form. That is how it shows. Internal notes never show, and then there's various styling items that we have for the different types of notes that we can do. Now, one thing to note, or that I kind of skipped, was that little remember me that was way over here. Okay, let me save out of this and open up my project again, and sure enough, I get a pop-up. And what happens is anytime there's an internal note, that it will show here. Most companies use this to communicate information between different individuals, and I've seen it abused a little bit where it basically basically noise, and everyone just hits close and doesn't look at it. But when used properly, it really allows everyone to say, hey, there's something special going on this project. Whatever it is, see me before you quote anybody else, or whatever the scenario is. And that's the original purpose for this, to really just be the, hey, here's something important, come see me on this. That is notes